Hey everybody, welcome to the show and welcome to the reading of the second half of my Superman fanfic, which is called Two Figures on a Riverbank. And so you will learn the reason for that title in the second half, and also in the second half there will actually be an appearance of Superman. I realized that it was a little bit of a a little bit of a tease in the first half of the story. I read up to a point and then stopped, and Superman had not actually appeared in costume in the story, but I promise you Superman this time. I promise you Superman, and I promise you sadness. There will be Superman and sadness, which are two things that I think are, crucial for a good Superman story. Um, so yeah, just a brief sort of recap as we get started. Before I start actually reading the yeah, some random geek in the chat says, "Will we get backstory?" Um, Yes and no. There's another flashback scene. Actually, the first scene I'm going to read in the story is another Smallville flashback scene. So I mean, if you call that backstory, but it's thematically relevant to the present day story. So it's backstory, but not for its own sake. So um, but yeah. So for those of you who didn't see the first half or have forgotten or just need a little bit of a catch up, the idea is that Clark and Lois are sort of investigating a story that they got caught up in when they were at the morgue for a press conference, and they found a grieving mother who had come to the morgue to identify the body of her daughter who was dead. And they tried to get some information from the police about who this child was and what her cause of death was and what the whole deal was. And they Detective Maggie Sawyer was the cop on the case, and she wasn't cooperating. She wasn't giving Clark or Lois any information. And so they went to the apartment building of the girls, the dead girl's mother, and they were sort of snooping around through her garbage to try and find something, because Lois suspected that there was something going on with the girl, because the mother had said something at the morgue about how if she had known what they were going to do to her, she never would have said yes. And she was wearing this really nice jacket, but she lives in a poor part of town. And Lois was like, how can she afford this? So there were wheels turning in the investigative reporter brain. And while they were snooping around at the apartment building, Clark noticed that one of the handrails on the back stairs of the apartment building had been crushed, like somebody had crushed it in their hand. And that made him sort of remember an event from his own youth when he was arguing with his parents over not getting to play on the football team in high school, because they didn't want to let him play on the football team. And so he sort of had a little outburst, like a bit of a tantrum, and he destroyed all of his sports equipment. And one of the things that he did was he crushed his aluminum baseball bat in his hand, and it left the same sort of imprint as was in the railing. Um, so as we ended the first half, Detective Sawyer had come to the Daily Planet to confront Lois and Clark about harassing the mother of this dead teenager. And as Detective Sawyer was leaving, Clark overheard her answer her cell phone, where she was informed that the body of the presumed dead teenager had actually just disappeared from the morgue. And Clark heard that with his super hearing. Lois didn't hear that, but Clark got up and left, knowing that he was going to have to transform into Superman in order to go see about this. So he sort of ditches Lois at the Daily Planet and goes off to the medical examiner's office to figure out what's going on. So that catches us up, and now I will begin to read the second half of Superman: Two Figures on a Riverbank. Um, Jonathan found him a few miles from the farm, down by the river at one of their favorite fishing spots. It was early morning, excuse me, it was early evening, and the daylight was waning. Jonathan left the truck parked by the side of the road and made his way down the hillside to where his son was standing. Had a talk with your mother? Jonathan asked, standing next to Clark, looking out across the water. Clark nodded, not looking at his father. Yeah. Jonathan chuckled. You've sworn off sports, then? Clark's brow wrinkled for a moment. Then he nodded, understanding. Oh, that. Yeah. I'm just glad you took it out on the football instead of on me, Jonathan said, still smiling. I wouldn't ever do that, said Clark, turning sharply toward his father, seeming irritated and hurt at the suggestion. Jonathan slipped his hands into his pockets. He nodded, slouching sheepishly. I know that, son. I was only joking. It wasn't funny. Clark turned away from him again. I apologize. Jonathan took a deep breath and let it out in a sigh. I know you never hurt anyone, Clark. At least not on purpose. Truth is, you're probably the gentlest person I've ever known. You're also the strongest. And that figures, because the really strong people I've known in my life have all been gentle. My parents, your mother. Clark didn't respond, just kept gazing out over the river in the opposite direction from Jonathan. Remember when we used to go fishing here? Jonathan asked. I remember snagging my line on that underwater log and snapping the pole in half, Clark said. Jonathan laughed. Oh, yes, you were, 10? Clark nodded. Wasn't very gentle that day. You could always tell what was a dead log from what wasn't, Jonathan said. Still made sure to tell me not to mention snapping that pole to Pete, though, said Clark, looking at Jonathan from the side of his eye. Didn't you? Yeah, Jonathan said quietly, holding Clark's gaze. I did. Clark turned sharply, facing his father directly for the first time. What are you doing here? You just wanted to put your hand on my shoulder and say, it's okay, son? It's not okay. I'm tired of having to lie about what I can do, about who or what I really am, of not even getting to try to find out. I'm tired of hiding. Jonathan let out a long sigh. I know. It's for your own protection, son. Protection from who? Who's going to hurt me? Remember when I was 12 and we were playing baseball and Ma accidentally line drived me in the head and I popped right back up like nothing happened? Remember last year when I took that turn too sharp on the tractor and it flipped over on top of me and I just pushed it back on its wheels and got up without a scratch on me? Who's going to hurt me, Pa? I don't know, Jonathan answered, raising his voice, but only just a bit. Whoever came and got that ship or satellite or whatever it was you crashed in, he went on, lowering his voice down close to a whisper. Your mother and I found you and brought you home. I drove back to that field not 2 hours later and it was gone, like it had never even been there. You don't think whoever took that thing might be curious about who was in it? You don't think they're smart enough to figure out that person might have gone to Smallville? Heck, Clark, you do one of your levitations to avoid a tackle and it'll be halfway around the world in 5 minutes. He swallowed thickly. And there's all kinds of ways to hurt somebody. Clark turned his back to Jonathan. He paced down the riverbank away from him. Do I just not get to be normal? You are who you are, Clark, said Jonathan. No, you're not the same as everybody else. You're you, and your mother and I love you. And when you turn 18, if you want to show the whole world everything you can do, I won't try to stop you. In fact, I'll support you 100%, whatever you want to do, however you want to live your life. But until then, it's my job to look out for you. And that's all I'm trying to do, Clark, I promise you. Clark stood there silently for a moment. Then he turned around to face Jonathan, a bitter smirk on his face. But you didn't want to get into all that, did you? I didn't come here to fight with you, son, Jonathan said. Then why? To say your mother's going to have supper on the table in a few minutes, Jonathan said, nodding up toward the truck. To take you home? Clark hesitated a moment, then shrugged. Let's go. He started up the hillside. Jonathan followed a few feet behind. You think Mr. Hubbard would hire me on to help out around his place this summer? Clark asked as he reached the top of the hill. Suppose he would, said Jonathan. Any particular reason? Yeah, said Clark, slowly beginning to smile. I gotta buy a new bat, a new glove, a new football, a new basketball. Jonathan smiled back and slapped Clark on the shoulder. I'll put in a good word for you. Detective Sawyer knelt down and examined the door to the cold locker, which hung open on its twisted lower hinge. When did you notice she was missing? Sawyer asked Emma Fitzgerald, the ME assistant who had called 911. It was right after the crashing and the screaming, Fitzgerald answered flatly. Sawyer glared up at Fitzgerald. About half an hour ago, Fitzgerald clarified. Right before I called, and whatever happened here happened right before that, is what I was trying to say. Got it. Sawyer stood. And she was gone by the time you got in here? You didn't see anything? No, Fitzgerald said, shaking her head. I mean, the alarm on the emergency exit at the end of the hall had been triggered, so I assume that's how she got out of the building. And the closet had been opened and rifled through, so I guess maybe she stole a set of scrubs? She would have needed clothes, said Sawyer, nodding along. But that's all? You didn't actually see anything else? Fitzgerald regarded Sawyer curiously. See anything like what? Like whatever ripped that door half off its hinges, Sawyer said, nodding down at the cold locker. I think you should consider the possibility that the missing girl did that herself. Everyone in the room, Sawyer, Fitzgerald, the other cops, and Emmy assistants who stood nearby, turned at the sound of the voice. It belonged to Superman, who had just stepped in from the hallway. The missing dead girl, Sawyer corrected him. She was the only person in the room who did not seem particularly impressed by his presence. Superman pursed his lips. He looked past Sawyer down at the busted cold locker. Given that the door appears to have been forced from the inside, I think it's at least reasonable to speculate that she's not dead. She was pronounced dead at the scene by paramedics yesterday morning, said Sawyer, crossing her arms. She's been in that cold locker almost the entire time since. If you know anything that could account for her suddenly waking up and deciding to go for a walk, I'd be very interested to hear it. Superman glanced around at the others in the room, then back to Sawyer. Can we have a minute in private, Detective? Sawyer nodded. This way, she said, brushing past Superman. She led him into the hallway, then into another room, a smaller, unoccupied office. Okay, she said, closing the door. What do you know? Not much at this point, unfortunately, said Superman, but I believe the girl, Philippa Horner, may have powers and abilities similar to my own. Sawyer's eyes widened. And where would she have gotten those from? I don't know, Superman said, shaking his head. I'm not even sure where mine come from. What makes you think the girl has superpowers? It's just a hunch. I've been following the case. Sawyer put her hands on her hips. Immortality one of your superpowers? I don't know, said Superman, but I've proven to be very resistant to damage. Perhaps that has something to do with it. Besides, super strength is one of my powers, and that would account for the broken door on that morgue locker. Indeed it would, said Sawyer. Any idea where we should start looking for this undead superpowered teenager? No, he said, shaking his head. I'm beginning my own search immediately. I'll contact you as soon as I locate her. And tell your people if they find her first, please be careful. There's no telling what state of mind she might be in. He stepped past Sawyer and opened the door. Understood. I'll alert the military to prepare for a tactical nuclear strike, she said, as he had one foot out the door. He stopped, turned back to her, his jaw tense, his expression grim. Joking, she said dryly. I certainly hope so, he said, and left the room. Outside, Superman was about to take off when he heard Lois approaching from up the sidewalk. "Miss Lane," he said, "you certainly got here fast." She looked at him, puzzled. "How's that?" "I only meant that the police just got here a short time ago themselves," he explained, flashing a reassuring smile. "Oh," said Lois with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Well, when I'm in a hurry, I treat those driving on sidewalk prohibited signs as suggestions more than, laws." "Right. So what was the hurry? Why rush over here?" "Oh, well, my so-called partner ran off to meet a source without telling me where he was going. He said it had something to do with an autopsy result we reported on yesterday, so I thought I'd take a chance that he might be here. You haven't seen him, have you?" "Clark? No, I haven't seen him." "Figures. Rushes out of the office to see God knows who, doesn't let anyone know where he'll be, least of all me. That's why they call him Mr. Reliable." "Does anyone other than you call him that?" "Not yet, but give it time, it'll catch on." "What about you? What are you doing here?" "A young girl who was thought to be dead disappeared from the morgue half an hour ago. There are signs she may have forced her way out of her cold locker and left on her own power." "On her own power? Like she came back to life?" "We really don't know what happened yet. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should... Was it Philippa Horner? Was that her name?" "Lois, I can't." "Please, just a simple yes or no. Off the record." Superman sighed. "All right. But only to keep you from getting arrested for badgering Detective Sawyer about it." He gave a nod of his head. "Yes, it's Philippa Horner." "I knew it! I knew there was something going on there." "Lois, I have to find this girl. She could be a danger to others. She could be in danger herself." "Of course, go! Up, and away. Just keep out of trouble, all right?" Superman leapt into the air, and in a few seconds he'd flown out of sight. "Psh, don't I always?" said Lois, watching him go, knowing he could still hear her. He could, of course, even though by the time Lois spoke, he was already nearly a mile away, soaring west toward Midtown, and then beyond that, to Southside. Loretta Horner answered the knock on her door to find Superman standing in the hall outside her apartment. She took several seconds trying to think of something appropriate to say, but ultimately all she came up with was, "Yes?" "Mrs. Horner," he said, "may I come in? I'd like to talk to you." He paused, then added, gently, "It's about your daughter." She invited Superman in. She found the presence of mind to offer Superman a drink, which he politely declined. Then she invited Superman to sit down, which he did. Superman sat down on her couch in her living room. She wondered if he could feel the pack of cigarettes she kept stashed under the cushion. Was that one of his superpowers? Super sensitivity? Like the Princess and the Pea? She sat down in the easy chair across from him. He leaned forward with his hands clasped between his knees. "Mrs. Horner, Loretta," she said, holding a hand up to her chest, "please." He smiled softly, almost bashfully. He seemed kind, genuinely kind, in a way that would have made her suspicious had he been anyone else. "Loretta," he began again, "I've just come from the morgue. Philippa is missing." "Oh, sweet Jesus." Her hand moved from her chest to her mouth. "Someone... What? Someone took her?" "It's possible. But there were signs that she may have left on her own." Loretta's eyes went wide. "What are you telling me? She's alive? My baby's alive?" Superman held out his hands, gesturing for her to keep calm. Could he hear how fast her heart was beating suddenly? "I'm not sure," he said. "Right now, it's only a possibility. Whether she's alive or not, it's very important that I find her. But in order for me to do that, I need to know as much as you can tell me about what happened to her. Loretta felt her face tighten. You mean about what they did to her? She clasped her hands in her lap. What I let them do to her. Who? Superman asked. Who did something to Philippa? They never told me who they were. It was a man and a woman, white, might have been in their mid-30s. The man said his name was Smith. The woman said her name was Jones. I figured they were fake names. But they showed up with an envelope full of cash, saying that they knew I was a week away from losing the apartment from not paying back rent. She had expected judgment, but the expression on Superman's face, the tone of his voice, offered only sympathy. And they told you what? That Philippa was a candidate for some kind of special program? Basically. Said there was some drug they invented, shots she had to take. It was supposed to make her stronger. They said if it worked, it could lead to new medical treatments, things like that. They told us she'd be doing a good thing for humanity. I thought it could be good for her, too. She was always such a scrawny little thing. Got picked on all the time when she was younger. She took these shots and they worked? Superman asked. They made her stronger? Oh, yes, it was almost overnight. In fact, they had me take her out of school, said they didn't want anyone asking questions. And they would have, I'm sure. She went through a growth spurt, shot up 3 inches in about a month. Started growing muscles, looking like Serena Williams all of a sudden. I noticed a dent in the railing on your back steps. Oh, yes, that was her, said Loretta, nodding her head. She did that without even trying. Called me outside. Mom, look what I did. I don't think she knew how strong she was. What happened yesterday morning? It was actually before that. The man and woman, Smith and Jones, they gave her another shot day before yesterday, but there was something different about this one, something wrong. She said she itched all over her body. She ran a fever. Her heart started beating faster and faster. I told her, lay down on the couch, put a cold cloth on your head, try and relax. And she tried that for a while, but all of a sudden she starts up like she's in a panic, like she can't keep still. She runs out of here. I had no idea where she went, where she was. Me and Michael went out looking for her, but, well, you know. A few hours after she left, I got a call from the police saying they fished a girl matching her description out of Hobbs River near the Racine Bridge. Jesus, she stifled a sob. Superman slid off the couch and knelt down in front of her. He took her hands in his. His skin was soft and so warm. He looked her in the eye when he said, Loretta, if your daughter is alive out there, I am going to find her. And I'm going to find the people who did this to her. I promise you. She couldn't stifle the next sob. It rushed out of her like water from a burst pipe. Thank you, she said, weeping as he reached up and took her in an embrace. Just help her, please. Just help her. I will, he whispered. I will. The front door opened. It was Michael. He froze 2 steps in. Oh, shit. Loretta pulled away from the hug and waved her hand harshly at her son. Watch your mouth in front of Superman. It's all right, Superman said with a chuckle. He stood. Michael, it's nice to meet you. He offered his hand. Michael shook it. I was talking to your mom about your sister. What about her? Asked Michael. She's alive, baby, Loretta said. What? Maybe, added Superman. Either way, she's missing, and I need to find her. You wouldn't happen to know any place she might be, would you, assuming she is alive? Michael took a deep breath. I mean, not really. There's a playground a couple blocks up from here where we like to hang out, but I was just there. I don't know. I'm sorry. Superman put his hand on Michael's shoulder. It's all right. I'll find her. He showed Loretta a final smile, nodded cordially, and then he was through the door and gone. Loretta got up and closed the door. She turned around to Michael, exclaiming, Superman? That was Superman! He was here! I know, she said, smiling through her tears, taking her son's face in her hands, touching her forehead to his. I know. Did he find your cigarettes? Oh, she shoved him away and swatted him playfully on the arm. Go find something useful to do besides tease your mother. He kissed her on the cheek and headed toward the kitchen. She stood there, watched him until he disappeared around the corner, then breathed a heavy sigh and sank down onto the couch where Superman had been sitting only a moment ago. Lex Luthor was sitting at his usual table on the private terrace at Le Marvin Bistro in Park Ridge when Lois Lane brought him his lunch. Bon appetit, she said, lifting the cloche to reveal a grilled cheese and a bowl of tomato soup. She lifted her eyebrows as she sat down across the table. I'm not sure what I expected, but that wasn't it. Grilled cheese and tomato soup were dietary staples where I grew up, Miss Lane, Lex said, unfolding his napkin and laying it across his lap. One never forgets one's roots. He picked up half of the grilled cheese and took a bite. Of course, he said through his teeth, the skills of the chef here somewhat exceed those of my mother. He swallowed and took a sip of water, though heaven knows she tried. Was she a very ambitious cook, your mother? Lois asked, leaning back in her chair. For example, if I looked through her recipe box, would I find a card with instructions for how to make, say, a superhero? The maitre d' appeared at the table, seeming flustered. Mr. Luthor, my deepest apologies, he said. She must have taken your lunch before the server had an opportunity to bring it to you. He turned to Lois, his demeanor suddenly more serious. Ma'am, I'm afraid I must ask you to leave the restaurant at once. No, I don't think so, said Lois, smiling up at him. In fact, if someone could bring me a Caesar salad and an unsweetened iced tea, that would be fabulous. It's quite all right, said Lex, waving him off. We'll be fine. Please, give us a few minutes. As you wish, sir, the maitre d' said, and withdrew with a bow. Now then, said Lex, turning back to Lois, I believe you were about to explain why you interrupted my lunch. The girl who escaped from the morgue this morning, she said, and please don't insult my intelligence by playing dumb. Lex dipped his grilled cheese into the tomato soup, took a bite, then put it down and shook his head. I'm sorry, Miss Lane, but I honestly have no idea what you're talking about. He picked up his napkin and dabbed at his mouth. Lois folded her arms and let out an irritated sigh. What did I just say? I'm telling you the truth, Lex said, chuckling. I assure you, I know nothing about any girl who was at the morgue this morning or how she may have escaped, let alone what she has to do with my mother's superhero recipe. All right, I'll humor you, said Lois with deliberate patience. Yesterday, there was a dead 15-year-old girl lying in a cold locker in the morgue at the medical examiner's office. Today, she's gone, and that cold locker looks like it was forced from the inside. That girl's mother recently made some rather large cash deposits to her bank account. Now, that's not nearly enough for me to know what's going on, but it is unusual and creepy. And I've been a reporter in this town long enough to know that when those two cross, it's usually you who's standing at the intersection. Lex regarded her thoughtfully. If you're so convinced it's my doing, why come here and tell me all of this? Aren't you tipping me off that you're on to me? That girl is out there somewhere, Lex. Alone. Probably frightened, confused. If you have an ounce of humanity in you and you know where she is or how to find her. Lex allowed the silence to hang between them for several seconds. I'll see what I can do, he said finally. Lois narrowed her eyes. Is that an admission that you are behind what happened to this girl? He shook his head. No, that I have an ounce of humanity. Lois rolled her eyes and stood. Enjoy your grilled cheese, she said sourly as she started inside. Don't you want to wait for your salad? Lex asked, watching her go. I'm suddenly not very hungry, she replied, and then she was gone. Lex shrugged and returned his attention to his lunch. Superman found her on the east bank of Hobbs River, not far from the Racine Bridge. She was sitting midway up the slope, her knees drawn up to her chest, hidden by the tall grass. He touched down near the water's edge where she could see him, hoping not to startle her. It mostly worked. She started to stand, but he motioned for her to stay put. "It's okay," he said calmly. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to make you do anything. I just want to talk." She stopped. She kept a wary eye on him as he started slowly up the bank toward her. "Philippa, right?" he asked. She nodded. She was dressed in the surgical scrubs she'd taken from the closet at the morgue. She didn't look cold, but Superman took off his cape and wrapped it around her shoulders all the same. He sat down in the grass next to her, assuming the same position, his legs pulled up to his chest. "I spoke to your mother not long ago," he said. "She'll be happy to have you home safe." "I didn't mean to worry her," Philippa said, resting her chin in the nook formed by her knees coming together. "I didn't know what to do, where I was supposed to go." Superman nodded. "I understand. It's all right." He studied her for a moment. "How are you feeling? Are you in pain?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "Not anymore. I was before I... you know." "Yeah," Superman sighed. "Is that why you jumped off the bridge yesterday?" Philippa exhaled a ragged breath. "Mm-hmm. I couldn't stand it, you know? It just really hurt, and I just wanted it to stop." Superman said nothing. "Do you have to take me to the police or something?" she asked, turning to look at him for the first time since he sat down. "I'd like to take you home," Superman said, "though I'm sure the police will want to talk to you." He inclined his head toward her. "But we don't have to go anywhere just yet. We can stay here a while longer if that's what you want. I can even leave you alone if you want some more time by yourself." "No, that's okay," she said. "Let's just sit here a minute longer, then we can go." Superman nodded. "Whatever you say." Philippa looked out over the water. "Is this how you got your powers?" she asked, her voice distant. "I don't think so." She snorted weakly. "You don't know?" She turned to look at him again. "You've just, what, always had them?" "Pretty much," Superman said with a shrug. "My abilities have increased as I've gotten older, especially once I got to be about your age, but ever since I was a baby, I've been able to do things that other people couldn't. I've been different." Now it was his turn to look out over the water and sigh. "I don't remember ever being normal," he whispered. "I do," Philippa said. "I guess that's over with." "Maybe," said Superman. "We don't know exactly what was done to you or how permanent it is, but even if it is something that remains with you for the rest of your life, it can still be a good life. Trust me." She grinned at him. "You would know, I guess." "Definitely," he said, returning the grin. "The way you live your life is going to be up to you," he went on, his expression softening along with his voice. "And also up to your mom, for a little while longer at least. How you deal with your powers, how open you choose to be with other people about them, those are things you can work out for yourself. And since I know a thing or two about it from experience, I'd be happy to offer advice if it's wanted. But there is no one way that you're supposed to be. I just want things to go back to how they were before all this started," she said, turning her head to rest her cheek on her knee. "Well, that might not be possible," said Superman gently. "But It is possible to live so that your powers don't completely consume your life. It just takes some practice to find the right balance. For real? Philippa said, incredulous. You still get to, like, just go to the mall and stuff? Absolutely, Superman said. The cape comes off, as you can see. She laughed. A second later, she got to her feet. Okay, she said. I'm ready to go home. Superman stood. All right. He held out his arms. Shall I carry you? I think you're going to have to, she said, wrapping his cape tighter around herself. I know I can't fly. She made him wait an awkward second before she cracked a smile. Come on, he said with a smirk and a shake of his head. And he lifted her up and carried her into the sky. Dr. Karen Gaines clicked off the TV. Still nothing on the news about our subject, she said, turning to Dr. Stan Goodman. Maybe we'll be okay. Goodman pulled another stack of folders from the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet and stuffed them into the briefcase on his desk. Right, he said. You be sure and drop me a postcard from prison and let me know how that turned out. He threw up his arms at the drawer, which was still more than half filled with documents. Why the hell did we print so much of this out anyway? Because you said the computer wasn't secure enough, remember? Said Gaines, lifting an eyebrow. Me and my brilliant ideas, Goodman groaned, bending over to collect another stack from the drawer. My sentiments exactly, said Lex Luthor from the doorway. The folders Goodman had just pulled from the drawer spilled from his arms onto the floor. Instinctively, he started down to gather them up, but Lex raised his hand. Save yourself the trouble, Dr. Goodman. I assure you neither of you are making it out of this building, much less to the airport to make use of those tickets to Bialia you purchased a few hours ago. Mr. Luthor, Gaines said, we always planned to inform you about our project eventually, but things just happened so fast, asked Lex, cutting her off. Got out of your control, took an unexpected turn. Frankly, I'm not interested in your reasons, explanations, or excuses. I've come here to show you the courtesy you neglected to show me, to inform you as to what's about to happen. I've already had my head of security contact the police to report a couple of rogue scientists who've been misappropriating company resources to conduct a secret project without my knowledge or consent, the result of which is the young woman who died, came back to life, and kicked her way out of the morgue today. Sir, said Goodman, speaking quickly, technically the girl didn't die. It's just that the serum caused her metabolism to... Quiet! Lex barked, his rage written across his face, but only for a moment. The next instant, he was again his calm, unflappable self. Tonight, you will be arrested. Your work here will be confiscated. The evidence of your wrongdoing, including computer records showing that you used LexCorp Financial's database to locate a parent desperate enough to make her child your test subject, and enhanced audio from security cameras which recorded conversations where you two master criminals discussed your scheme in detail in this very building, all of which my people were able to discover in a matter of hours as soon as they knew to look for it, will be turned over to the authorities. Tomorrow, there will be a press conference where I will disavow you both, announce a comprehensive restructuring of the entire technology division of LexCorp to ensure something like this can never happen again, and pledge to financially support this girl and her family, including any medical care and mental health counseling she may require, as well as a college education for her and her brother, all in the hopes that someday she may find it in her heart to forgive me and my company for what you did to her. That seems only fair, said Dr. Gaines with a shrug, turning to Goodman. Mr. Luthor, I swear to you, we started this project hoping it would someday be of great benefit to the company and to you personally, Goodman said, taking a step closer to Lex. We never meant for it to cost you so much, and if we had known... Cost me what? Asked Lex. What I'm paying that girl and her family? Please. My quarterly stock dividend alone could cover that 1,000 times over. Lex started toward Goodman, who now began backing away. If you really want to reckon the costs, don't think of money. Think of the fact that you created a serum capable of transforming an ordinary human into a superhero. And because of your bumbling incompetence, that serum is now of absolutely no use to me whatsoever. That is what you and Dr. Gaines have cost me with your slapdash Smith & Jones charade. That is why I'm going to make sure you both spend the rest of your lives in a place with high walls, cold floors, and very, very bad food. Lex had backed Goodman up against the wall behind the filing cabinet by this point. Lex stood there, staring at him coldly, then stepped away and marched briskly out of the office. "The police will be here in a few minutes," he said as he passed through the door. "I never was." Goodman let out a shaky sigh. "Jesus Christ," he whimpered, wiping his hands down his face. A moment later, a cup of pencils hurled at him by Gaines hit him in the chest. "I told you we should have run it by him first," she yelled, and kicked the side of her desk. For the second time today, Loretta Horner opened her door to find Superman standing on the other side of it. This time, her daughter was with him. Loretta reached out and pulled her daughter in for a tight embrace. "Oh, thank you, God," she said, kissing her daughter's cheek over and over again. "I thought I lost you. I thought I lost you." Philippa hugged her mom tight too, though not as tight as she could have. When she finally let her daughter go, she reached out for Superman. "Thank you, she said through her tears as her arms went around his neck. "You're so very welcome," he said, smiling down at her. "She's a wonderful young woman." I know it, Loretta said, releasing Superman and pulling Philippa back in. Michael emerged from his room and rushed over. Brother and sister embraced. "I don't know how I can ever repay you," Loretta said, turning to Superman. He shook his head. "You don't have to." He looked past her to Philippa, still hugging her brother. "When she's ready, when you're all ready, you should contact Detective Sawyer. She'll need to know Philippa is safe." Loretta nodded. "And what else should I tell her?" Superman sighed. "That's up to you. But I think you should consider telling her the truth. It'll be better for you in the long run and make it easier to find the people responsible." Philippa came walking over, shrugging off his cape. "Don't leave without this," she said, holding it out to him. He held up a hand. "You keep it. I have others." She gathered the cape up in her arms and hugged it to her chest. "Thank you." He smiled. "Take care of yourself. I'll check in from time to time, if that's all right." And Philippa nodded. "Okay." He started for the door and beckoned Loretta to follow him. When they were standing in the hallway, he leaned in. "I noticed you got rid of the cigarettes," he whispered in her ear. "Good for you." She drew back and stared at him in amazement. Superman winked and tapped the tip of his nose. She blinked. "Oh, we thought it was your, something else." He laughed. Then he walked to the end of the hall and left by the stairs, just like anyone else. Lex had been speaking for less than 10 minutes, and Lois was already restless, shifting around uncomfortably in her seat. "Are you okay?" Clark asked, half laughing. "It's these chairs," she said. "He's the richest man on the planet, and for the press conference, he puts out these plastic cafeteria chairs. Now, you tell me that's not on purpose." "I'm sure it's just as calculated as everything else." "You ain't kidding." Lois crossed her arms, then uncrossed them a second later. "It's a waste of time for us to even be here. You know he's not taking questions." Clark shrugged. "Maybe he'll surprise us." "Finally, I will not be taking questions," said Lex. Lois gave Clark an "I told you so" look, which he received with a sigh. "But," Lex continued, "I want to assure everyone that from the moment this unauthorized operation was discovered, every possible step has been taken to find those responsible and turn them over to the authorities, and to ensure that something like this is never, ever allowed to happen again." Lex paused. He took a breath, as though what he was about to say was of particular importance. "Not even a man with my extraordinary resources can solve all the world's problems. But I can try to do some good. And at the very least, I can see to it that I don't add to those problems. I failed in this instance, but I promise you, as I promised this poor, traumatized child and her family, that I will not repeat that failure. And furthermore, I promise that whatever this child or her family needs, LexCorp will be there, and I will be there to see to that need. Thank you." Lex turned and left the stage, ignoring the questions being shouted by the assembled journalists, most of them anyway. Lois didn't waste time shouting a question. She elbowed Clark in the ribs and threw her head toward the exit. "Let's go." "Did you get a load of that LexCorp will always be there bit?" she asked in the car a few minutes later as she was pulling into traffic. "I'm going to be keeping tabs on the super kid," is what he means. "Well," said Clark, gazing out the window, "he's not the only one." "That's the truth," said Lois. "The general public might not know Philippa's identity, but we do. And if Lex thinks he's going to get away with anything else where she's concerned, he's got another thing coming." Clark heaved a sigh. "Speaking of the truth," he said, turning to Lois, "I feel like I owe you an apology." "I'm listening," she said. "For what?" "Yesterday, when I rushed out of the office, I said I was leaving to meet a source." "Uh-huh." "In truth, there was no source. I just made that up as an excuse." Lois gasped. "Clark Augustus Kent!" She stared at him, mouth hanging open. He pointed out the front windshield. "Please watch where you're going." "Are you telling me," she said, returning her eyes to the road, "that you, proud scion of the living Currier and Ives painting that is Smallville, Kansas, told a fib?" "I'm not proud of it, and I just wanted—" "So where were you really going?" Lois interrupted. "Where?" She glanced at him expectantly from the side of her eye. "Superman," he said. "To talk to Superman." Lois narrowed her eyes. "Superman texts you?" Clark hesitated. "We communicate." "Okay, so what did Superman want to talk to you about?" "Actually, I wanted to talk to him. I noticed something when we were at Mrs. Horner's apartment building. The handrail at the back door had been crushed, like by someone's hand. I wanted to see if Superman knew anything about it." "I see," said Lois, nodding thoughtfully. "So you actually told two fibs, because when I asked you about that as we were leaving Mrs. Horner's place, you said it was nothing." "Right," Clark said. "Yes. So for that, and for lying to you when I left, I apologize. I'm very, very sorry, Lois." Lois glanced over at him, and then shrugged. "So you're only, 99% Boy Scout? I guess I can live with that." "Really? So we're good?" "Yeah," Lois said. "Don't worry about it." "Okay. Thank you." Clark watched the city rush past the window for a minute or so. "You know that's not actually my middle name, right?" he asked at last. She snapped her fingers ruefully. "I'll get it one of these days." The stoplight up ahead turned yellow, and the car directly in front of them slowed to a stop. "Yellow means proceed with caution, not stop, for God's sake!" She muttered something nearly unintelligible under her breath. Clark cleared his throat. "I'm not sure that's actually possible." Lois let out a huff. "Well, apparently neither is getting anywhere in a timely fashion." She let her hand slip off the wheel into her lap. Listen, she said, looking over at Clark. Just don't make lying to me a habit, okay? I won't, Lois. He lied. The end. That's the end of the story. So, yeah, I hope you liked it because that's all the story there is. Radical Bacon, road rage Lois. Nah, maybe. I don't know if I'd say she has road rage. She's a very aggressive driver. We'll put it that way. And Geralta Trekkie, no, his middle name is not Calvin. He's not CCK. No. Oh, thank you, beautifulest one. Oh, that's. I feel like that's overpraising it a bit, but I'm very, very glad you liked it. Lois Augusta Lane. Dana, have we decided what Lois's middle name is? I don't think we've talked about Lois's middle name. I don't know if Lois has a canonical middle name or not. We do know what our version of Clark's middle name is going to be. Our Clark, his middle name, his middle name is actually Jerome. But there's going to be a running joke where Lois gets his middle name wrong on purpose all the time. But his actual middle name is going to be Jerome. And yeah, of course, Lois's middle initial, it has to be L, right? It has to be Lois L. Lane, right? Yeah. Let me look that. I don't know if she has a canonical middle name or not. Apparently, in the comics, it is often given as Joanne. I don't know how I feel about that. I think we'll have to have a writers' conference about that and see what we think Lois's middle name should be. I don't know if Joanne is the best middle name for Lois. We'll have to see. But yeah. So yeah. Hope you all liked it. Like I said, the next fanfics. Oh, thank you, beautifulest one. That's very nice. And Brinpoo KC also for the super chats. Thank you very much. The beautifulest one says, does Philippa receive training from the Amazons through a connection with Diana? Maybe. I mean, I do think. I don't know if I don't know if I'm going to write a subsequent story where Philippa returns, but I do know that, like, it was very intentional when I wrote the story that she still has her powers at the end of the story. Like she is alive and well, and she still has superpowers. So I don't know like what's going to. I don't think she becomes like a full on superhero. I think it's probably the case where she uses her powers in her everyday life to sort of help people out. And maybe if there's like an emergency, she might do what she can, but she doesn't establish like an ongoing superhero identity. I don't really see that for her, but I think she does keep the powers. And Bryn Poo KC says that was just beautiful, so fun to watch you reading. Well, I thank you very much, and again, thank you for the super chat. And thank you, Some Random Geek, for saying you enjoy the coming of age story. I really appreciate that. I think it turned out pretty good. And Geralta Trekkie, yes, I did know that. I did know that Bruce Wayne was almost played by Lyle Waggoner. I believe Lyle Waggoner was the runner-up to Adam West. He almost got the part in the 1966 Batman series, but Adam West eventually got it. And yeah, that's interesting because, and I've seen his screen test. I think it's online, and I believe it's also a special feature on the Batman, the DVD box set of the 60s Batman show. So you can see Lyle Waggoner's screen test, and he's not bad. I mean, he doesn't do it quite the same as Adam West does. But also the interesting thing is Lyle Waggoner, circa 1965, 1966 was much closer to a match for how Bruce Wayne was typically drawn in the comics. Like he looked a lot more like you would imagine Batman looks. He had much more, the just sort of the shape of his head and his jawline. He looked a lot more like Batman than Adam West did. But they cast Adam West, presumably because Adam West had a better take on the character, that Adam West was better for the comedy, had better timing, had a more funny approach to the character, because Batman in the 60s, that show is a comedy. Look at that. Some random geek busting out the Lyle Waggoner screen test. Boom. There you go. linked in the chat. Check it out. Um, but yeah, it's it's an interesting little bit of history because I don't think he would have been bad, but would he have been as funny as Adam West? I mean, Lyle Wagner was obviously funny. He was on the Carol Burnett show. He it's not like he wasn't a funny guy, but would he have had a take on the character of Batman in that show that would have been as funny as Adam West? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, Emily. Yeah, he may have been less camp, which would have changed the show. You know, because I mean, it was like that show in many ways created the whole concept of camp in the public imagination anyway. Like the 66 Batman, if you want to if you're trying to explain the concept of camp to another person who isn't familiar with it, the 60s Batman show is one of the first things to cite. Just say, oh, like the 60s Batman show, you know, like just over the top, intentional, tongue in cheek absurdity, just excess in different ways, but like a self aware excess. Like that's the Batman 60s show all the way. Yeah, that's true. He was, yeah, and of course, yeah, Lyle Wagner was in Wonder Woman as well. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's a random geek. Yeah, it's hard to imagine. I mean, like I say, I'm not. I'm sure Lyle Wagner would have done a good job, but it's difficult. You think of moments like that iconic bit in the 60s Batman movie when there are some days you just can't get rid of a bomb. It's like how it's hard to imagine another actor doing that and pulling it off as well as Adam West does. Like it's just he's absolute perfection. He's comic gold. He's comedy gold as Batman. Um, Gerald Trekkie says, I'm all for 1D training Philippa. Isn't Philippus actually one of the Amazons, by the way? I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not familiar enough with Wonder Woman to be able to answer that question. But yeah, so I have no idea when it will be done. I haven't even actually officially started writing it yet, but as I've mentioned in a couple of more recent streams, I know what my next fanfic is going to be, and it is going to be a Green Lantern Flash team up time travel story where the Green Lantern and the Flash travel back in time to World War II and team up with their World War II counterparts, the original Green Lantern and the original Flash, to fight Nazis and to do other things as well. But they end up fighting Nazis. I haven't actually. I haven't actually started writing it yet, but I've written notes for it, and I have sort of a general idea of how it's going to go. But I haven't actually written it yet, or even started writing it yet. So I don't know how long it's going to be before that one's done, before I'm reading that one. But that will almost certainly be the next one that I write to do like a live read of. So yeah. Oh, Radical Bacon, they're going to punch so many Nazis. There's going to be Nazi punching and Nazi kicking, and Green Lantern's going to make some shit with his power ring and slap that into a Nazi's face. I mean, there's going to be the Nazis that will be punched in this story. Oh, 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 it just warms my heart to think about it. It warms my heart to think about it. Yeah, yeah. I knew Dana was going to ask when's the next one. Oh yeah, okay. The modern Green Lantern, or the Green Lantern who travels back in time will be Hal Jordan, and the Flash will be Barry, and the Green Lantern, and of course the original. They will meet the Golden Age Green Lantern and Flash, which are Alan Scott and Jay Garrick. So those are the specific Flashes and Green Lanternses that will be appearing in the story. Yes, random geek, exactly. I don't like these modern political comics. I like comics before they were all political. Well, this story will be very political. In the sense that punching Nazis is super political. I mean, I don't think there's going to be like a really super strong like allegory to it, other than isn't it weird that they're fighting Nazis in the modern day and they're fighting Nazis in World War II as well? Who would have thought that that would happen? Um, which Green Lantern? Oh, which Green Lantern will make something with his ring and use that to punch the Nazis? Oh yeah, they'll probably both do that. Both of them. Yeah. Hal and Alan will both use their power rings to manifest some kind of construct and use that to just beat the shit out of some Nazis. Oh yeah, they'll both do it. They'll both do it. Just like both Jay and Barry will punch Nazis really, really fast. They'll have like a Nazi punching contest. They'll sort of like there'll be a whole bunch of Nazis and they'll divide the room in half and they'll be like, you take the Nazis on the left and I'll take the Nazis on the right, and we'll see who can punch the most Nazis in the shortest amount of time. There you go. Yeah, both is good. I agree, Dana. Both of them using their rings to beat up Nazis is good. So that is how it shall be. Maybe that should be the title of the story. Just punch the Nazis. Thank you, Walter Trekkie. Green Lantern and the Flash. Just punch the Nazis. So anyway, yeah, that'll be the next story. I hope you all enjoyed this story. I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the stream here in a minute, so we don't go on all night. But I really hope that you enjoyed it. Those of you who got here a little late and didn't hear all of it, please, go back and watch the stream from the beginning and watch the so you can hear the whole story. Go back if you missed it last week. Go back to last week's stream and catch up on the first half, because self praise is cheap praise, but I think it turned out to be a pretty good story. I think it'd be a pretty good story. I was pleased with it. I was happy with it. It felt good when I was writing it. It felt like this was turning out to be a good story. So, and I do love me a good Superman story. I think it's a pretty good Superman story. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget the charity links in the description to help out some friends of ours who need a helping hand. That Some Random Geek is always very good enough to curate and maintain for us. Charitylinks.page is the URL, and it's also linked in the description. Don't forget patreon.com/Steve Shives if you want to support my work here on YouTube. And don't forget tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, myself, Jason Harding, Dana Cole, we will be on the air live together, all three of us live in a live stream at the same time for the first time ever for the Season 3 Ensign's Log live Q&A stream. That's going to be tons of fun. Me and Dana and Jason on the show all at the same time, answering your questions, talking about the Ensign's Log. It's going to be a great time. That's tomorrow on this channel at 6 p.m. Eastern. And yeah, that'll be fun. Hope you can make it for that. Dana's saying, oh dear. I presume that's because you're nervous about the stream. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. It's going to be so great. It's going to be so much fun. No pressure. It's going to be so much fun. Yes, and Radical Bacon, I'm sure you will see to it. You will continue to carry out your role-playing game-based vendetta, your bullying against me. No, Riker would not play D&D. Of course, Riker would play poker, and I think poker is boring as hell anyway. Like, I don't like poker either. So, I can't go with Riker on that. Maybe he does play D&D. Maybe Riker probably has other hobbies that I think are fucking dull as shit. So maybe he does play D&D. I don't know. I wouldn't have pegged him as a D&D player, but maybe he is. Anyway, that's it, everybody. Thank you. In character, Jordan Joan P. in character. If it goes the way that the previous streams have been, it'll be kind of half in character, half out of character. It'll sort of depend on whether we're answering a question or not. But if a question is asked of a character, we'll answer it in character. If a question is asked of us as ourselves, we'll answer it as ourselves. That's kind of the way it's gone in the last couple ones. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Have a good evening. We'll see you tomorrow for the Ensign's Log live stream. And that's it. Thanks for listening to me read my story, and hope you liked it. And take care, everybody.